So before I go into slides, I had to adapt myself over the last 24 hours, lots of plane delays, luggage still sitting in Denver. Go with the flow. I'm going to say, so you're not getting the normal me in a suit, you're getting me in an airplane mode where I'm more comfortable in wearing running shoes to get from one gate to the other. A little bit of ATCO. I'm going to talk about ATCO Electric in the next couple of slides. But ATCO is a global company. We have transmission and distribution gas and electric assets in Canada. We have gas generation facilities in Australia. We have also facilities in Puerto Rico. So we're quite global. We also have assets in the north of Canada. Okay, I'm not doing it right. Just the arrows, right? Okay. Okay, so just a little bit. So Dallas kind of pointed you about where he is in Calgary. I have to make this. I'm a hockey fan, so Salt Lake is getting a hockey team. Super excited. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But you'll get to know where Edmonton is, which is the home of the Oilers on the next slide, and where the Calgary Flames are on the next slide. But ATCO Electric, so we have over 77,000 kilometers of lines. So for US folks, it's around 48,000 miles of lines. Most of it's in the distribution, and then we've got over 11,000 kilometers of transmission line. We're located in a fairly vast terrain. It's a pretty big province. What you see in the blue, light blue, is our territory, and I'm going to refer that territory a few times through the next couple slides to give you background. We serve a lot of rural load. A lot of our customers, we serve a lot of Indigenous communities. We have many radial transmission lines, one line into those communities, no redundancy in that system. And sometimes it's one transmission line, one substation, and then a few radial distribution lines that can go for kilometers. I'm going to say 40, 50-kilometer lines are in our system. We serve over 242 communities in the north, and over the 85 years that we've been serving the territory, we've built a lot of Indigenous relationships, which are really important to us in terms of because of the communities we serve. I was really happy to hear about communities and humanity because our territory, and because we're so rural, has significant impact when we have extreme climate events. One more note on our kind of where we are in terms of climate or weather. So in the south, where Dallas lives, sometimes you'll see plus 40, so 105 degrees Celsius. We've seen a lot more of those in the last couple of years. And in the north, you'll see, which are regular temperatures, minus 50 Celsius to minus 50 Fahrenheit. So our operating range in terms of temperature and what we need to design with, maybe it's a good thing. We're like not like Texas. We've known that we need to have built extremes, but those extremes are getting, I say, more prominent. And because of fire smoke, we're seeing a lot more impacts to our system. Again, I'm going to go back to a territory just because it's important. The green zone, which overlaps with our territory. So the green zone is what we call the fire protected area, and the gray hatch is our territory. So the majority of our territory is in what we call the boreal forest, which burns a lot. And I don't want to keep talking about wildfires, but I think that's the world we live in today. And so 50% of our assets are actually located in there. We have just overall, we have over 300 substations or 400 substations, 300 telecom towers. We've seen impact to a lot of our territory over the couple of years. There's some communities in there that I'm going to refer to in the next slide. So again, fairly north, high level. So a lot of these communities, although they're remote, have a significant impact to our economy in Alberta. So they have gas, oil facilities. Fort McMurray, my background in the oil sands is there. I spent half my career in Fort McMurray. So a lot of they have cogeneration there, so they can backfeed. But those communities are located and surrounded by boreal forest. And then Jasper, which is I would say a crown jewel of Alberta. It's a national park. I'm going to talk about that because it's been in the news this year for sure, but it's not the first time where we've had issues in that community. So adaptation is key. this bar chart. In blue is our service territory. And in yellow is orange non-service territory. In the last 14 years, I don't have the 24 stats yet, we see significant impact to our infrastructures and the communities we serve due to wildfires. And I think there's a trend almost every 2 to 3 years, there's some significant fires. I say fires in Alberta are not an unknown thing, or boreal forest, the way it regenerates and regrows, it actually needs to burn. So, there's part of that, it needs to happen, but the rate and the intensity it's been occurring in the last couple of years has been quite significant. Slave Lake, 2011, if you talk to the response that occurred there, the fire speed of approaching the community was an aha moment. And I can go back, we have some significant fires in, I think, 1950s, 1998, but these were the ones where the intensity significantly started changing and impacting communities, burning communities down. For McMurray, that one started in early April of 2016. We talked about those temperature ranges. In late March, we were seeing temperatures in the 90s. Snowpack had already melted. It's typically when our fire season starts for us is March 1st. But that came with an intense fire. It ballooned, and we know that was actually, from a Canadian perspective, our highest insurance payout in terms of insurable climate events. High level, which is 2019, again, in the north. That's why, because that's really where our impacts, our climate impacts are being felt. When we looked historically, 2019 was a significant fire season in Canada. We thought that was one of them. Like, we talked about records being broken. They seem to be happening more often. 2019 was a significant year in terms of wildfires. Then 2022 hit, Jasper. So we talked about Crown Jewel. It's a small in terms of hectares being burned, but that community had no power for a significant amount of time. We bought in gas generators. We needed, from an emergency response, respond fairly quickly and be able to provide community lighting and just making sure that they had power to respond. Then 2023 hit. I don't know how to describe that. I know Dallas, like we said, the curve of fire days in Alberta looks like a hockey stick. I'm going to do the analogy again. Thank you for that. That was beyond anything anybody thought we were going to see. So 5.4 million acres of land were burned, and the majority of that was in our service territory. You can see we've been really great at responding to fires. Like, that some of them, we respond. 2023 was a completely different season. Obviously, we were in emergency response from March till probably October, November that year, trying to, and then rebuild and adapt. We did some great things in 2023, but we also said, okay, we can't keep doing this. Like, we can't keep managing emergency responses. Like I said, we know the forest will have some impact, but what we can do differently. So in mid-2023, the conversations around changing and being proactive and really looking at what others, I'm going to say San Diego, and especially in California, have been doing about being proactive and doing things differently, really started to resonate with ATCO, and putting the focus in building a team to look at climate adaptation and reliability. We kind of put those in hand, resiliency, because they're really key in terms of making sure we take all the lessons learned we've had and putting those forward so we can proactively change what we're going to do going forward. Some of the good things we did in the past fires, and I'd say when we talk about technology or solutions, some of them are physical and then some are technology driven. But we did things in the 2023 wildfire response where we fire wrapped poles, which is just really adding some resiliency to those structures on a right of way. And that just allows us to be able to respond or work with the fire department so they don't burn instantaneously, especially if it's a grass fire. But they could also, we have worked with some of the fire group departments where they've called on us to de-energize the line so they can also add fire retardant on our right of ways, which again, it just gives us the opportunity or gives them the opportunity to respond and then slow the fire down, which is very key in some of the fires we've seen. We've talked about asset hardening, absolutely. We are on a journey of undergrounding our distribution assets, especially where in those areas, on the Jasper, I forgot to mention the last slide. Jasper burned again this year, which we were in the process of undergrounding those facilities. Now we're accelerating that because the fire's intensity in Jasper this year, I think we saw fire weather. They were saying 150 kilometers per hour fire winds, so 100 miles per hour. It ripped apart metal infrastructure, things that, and you're in a valley, right? You're in the Rocky Mountains, things we've never experienced, even in a northern boreal forest and types of fire behavior. So building steel won't work, right? So undergrounding is obviously a solution that we need to do. We're advancing some asset replacement. Some of the things we're doing, even starting next year, is we're even reconductoring some of our older facilities. So they may not be of asset health or condition to be completely replaced, but we're reconductoring assets where we think there may be a risk of causing a fire, but also a risk of taking the system down. We're seeing too many outages in this type of conductor on the distribution side. We're continuing our fire mesh program. Really, that we do it also in real time, sometimes because we have so many structures. We've got actually, if you think, I put the stats there, we got over 1 million distribution poles, right? So you can't do that all in one shot. So sometimes we'll go ahead of a fire and fire mesh, but we do have a plan to fire mesh the majority of our poles. And then we're looking at our engineering standards. Thank you, Brandon, for the comment around NERC standards and reliability standards. A lot of the industry standards today are always retroactive. We're looking at what's happened before. So now we're really looking at, we need to add a safety factor to that because we're not really sure yet what we're going to do from a climate change perspective. But what we have been designing and what has been designed is in the field today, we know will not sustain what's coming in the future. So we really need to change our approach from an engineering perspective. We're advancing some technologies. I'll kind of go through that on the next slides. Looking at line conditions. So in real time, how are assets doing from a distribution perspective as well as transmission? We're piloting some cameras this year and what we call smoke sensors and weather stations. I'm saying we've learned from California because they have some great systems there, and really looking at how we can expand that as in Alberta, but as well as in Canada. So we're working with some of the providers there to see what we can do. The other thing we're looking at is vegetation management. We can't underestimate removing the vegetation from our assets or in that area. So not only does it create a buffer from a fire perspective, it gives the ability for firefighters to respond if we have larger right-of-ways, but it also ensures that if a tree falls or it doesn't hit our infrastructure, which causes an accidental ignition. We are actually with the government of Alberta right now. We've discussed areas where those communities at risk, where there's fuel there today and there's a lot of vegetation, where we can actually work with them to widen those right-of-ways, which if anybody works in the industry, widening a right-of-way is not necessarily easy because you need approvals, you need to, some areas in our national parks we've got the smallest right-of-ways in the world, right? Because they don't want to cut down the trees. So more work to be done on that. And then lastly, is looking at our climate adaptation and really figuring out, so holistically, and it's not just transmission, it's distribution, or telecom infrastructure, or substation infrastructure, and looking at all of our assets from an asset health perspective and really overlaying a climate scenario. We've, for those of the RPC 8.5 is like the extreme case, but then there's so many other climate scenarios that we're doing. So this journey is just really starting for us. Again, I'm going to say kudos to the state of California because they have so many proactive things, and I think they've just done things that we can all emulate in some of our own provinces in Canada. So because this is a lot on technology, I was going to spend a little bit on technology. I'm gonna say, if you have questions on these later, come see me. I'll give you the name, the person you can reach out to my team to talk to them about. But there's a couple, four things that we're really working on. So the first one is early fault detection. So that on our distribution system. So really identifying what it is on those distribution lines that could either impact the grid, our customers, or can ignite a fire. Again, this is a technology that's used in other jurisdictions, but really piloting this. So I think we're doing 40 kilometers or 28 miles this year, and 1,000 kilometers next year, and progressively adding 1,000 kilometers, 6,000 miles next year, and progressively adding some of those early fault detection systems on our distribution asset. But to me, I'm going to say this is a temporary thing. It's as we wait to harden the system or replace our asset, it's just going to give us that temporary information that we can at least react in real time, proactively do something. We talked about public power shutoffs. This may be one of those that the information tells us that we're seeing weather events coming in. This line may be at risk. We have issues on it. We want to implement public PSPS. That's not in the works yet in Alberta. We're still working on how that's going to actually be implemented. The other two projects we're looking at dynamic line ratings on some 144 kV lines. One of them is in the northwest region of the province, where we have some grid congestion and some radial transmission line, and really looking to see in real time what we're going to be able to do to enhance the grid if we have any situation that needs to. And we are also looking at a project in the southeast of our province, where we have a lot of wind and solar, and trying to see if we can adapt the capacity of the line once all that solar is online. The other thing that dynamic line ratings we'll see in the next 12 months when those projects are energized, is we want to see how it reacts to wind, right? With climate change, we anticipate, and we have seen it, wind is getting stronger. How are we going to be able to adapt those transmission line in a wind event with our dynamic line ratings? So more to come. A lot of these are still in pilot phase. And then the last one is lightning arresters on the transmission system. So thanks, Dallas, because that was, it is key. We have old infrastructure. Again, before we can actually replace it and determine what we're going to replace it is, are we going to underground it or just build new with overhead shield wires? We still have assets that are exposed to lightning today. And we have pockets of lightning, and those pockets of lightning are going to get more and more as we see in a temperature rise due to climate change. More temperature rise, more extreme storms, more lightning. So in those areas, we're actually piloting these will be done over the next 8 months, piloting some lightning arresters on our 72 kV infrastructure and some of our 144 kV infrastructure. And lastly, battery storage. We're in the works. We do have isolated generation on our system today, but we're really looking at those communities in the north, which are, our Indigenous communities, and working with them and partnering to see where we can add battery storage. But battery storage by itself has grid issues, right? You need to restore the battery, you need to drain it, you can't just let it sit there. So really that integration of planning of those facilities is going to be key going forward. I think right now we got 8 sites. We're going to be talking to those communities to see if there's partnerships to put them on our system. And then lastly, support load on a temporary basis. Batteries on a truck. We've seen them, they exist. We have mobile substation today, but that technology is changing. So really, how can we start using that temporary basis in an event like for the first time Jasper had the fire? Could we have done battery on a truck there to restore load versus gas, fuel, just diesel generators to supply load? So those are items that are, again, being considered right now. We're in the process of evaluating that different vendors in terms of where we're going to go next. And what industry needs? I would say, yeah, I'm going to talk about the first one because I didn't like the way I wrote it. So I heard about data. I heard a lot about data. Data is absolutely key. Data, AI is key. So if you look at today, we have really good vegetation, I'm going to say, models on AI, like how can we growth patterns and so forth. We have great weather models. We have smoke models. Yeah, use that all the time, especially in Alberta. But we have fuel models, which are changing the way we do fuel. So combining the fuel, the smoke, the weather, the vegetation, what we're seeing in real time, I say real time, that's 72 hours, can we do something, is so key to the industry, because then we can, from an emergency preparedness perspective, react and do something different that will protect our public and our community. So there's a lot going on there, but putting that all of it together, I think, is going to be key going forward. So we might need data centers just for this. And then my last comment around what industry needs is alignment on climate modeling and design standards. So, you know, there's multiple climate models on there. I know, listening to EPRI, you know, like, how do we take all those climate models and decide what these are the top 5 that we should really kind of model against, or figure out what we need to go forward, knowing fully that like we're performing a climate adaptation vulnerability assessment, that's not a one-time of. I see that we're going to be doing that every 3 or 5 years, like on a regular basis, because those models will get smarter, we'll get more information, and we'll be able to see what we can do differently going forward. And design standards, yeah, I'm my biggest win if we can get to a, you know, what are those key parameters? I'm going to say not only on the transmission, but on the distribution system that really drive what we need to do going forward from an, you know, is it undergrounding? Is it covered conductor? Is it, you know, wider right-of-ways? But really looking at those design standards on both D and T to enable more and more resilient asset grid. And then just if you want to look, I said we were really good at responding, so well that we won a EEI Con Edison Award for wildfire response last year. But I'm going to say, from a resourcing perspective and people impact, I'd rather our people would rather be not responding and building a grid of the future. So thank you.